Well, former Labor Minister Bill Shorten, he's off earning a pretty penny as Vice-Chancellor of Canberra University these days, but he's called on the government to fight back against Donald Trump's tariffs at the same time as the opposition has been accusing the Prime Minister of selling out Australian steel makers. Now, the government's ruled out retaliatory tariffs, but Mr Shorten thinks that every option should be on the table.
At some point, we'll have to send a message to Mr Trump. This is what I'm hearing from people on the street, that if you do something to us, we'll do it back to you. We cannot be pushed around. At the end of the day, if they keep putting tariffs on all of our goods, then we've got to reciprocate dollar for dollar, tariff for tariff.
Joining me now to discuss this and more is former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman. Campbell, thank you for joining me. What do you make of what Shorten's had to say here? Is it correct that we should go eye for an eye, like for like on this stuff?
Well, I think, Caleb, and thanks for having me, I think we're going to have to soon, because whilst I'm one of the people who was pleased to see Donald Trump elected as president, because I see him as sweeping away a whole lot of the woke nonsense, I don't particularly like the way he's carried on in the past, and particularly the last 2 weeks have absolutely dismayed me. I think we're going to get to a point where we have to take the US on. And I think we've got to be very careful about how we do it, obviously, but it's about how do we apply political pressure on Donald Trump from his own people. So I'm talking about American companies that are exporting to this country. The most critical ones, most important ones, they're the ones that we need to think about and actually make the overtures that we will do stuff that won't be in their interests. Look, the bottom line is, we value the relationship with the United States. We shouldn't do anything, that will ultimately compromise that. But we do have to stand up, and we can't just plead. We can't just throw ourselves on the floor and say, "Oh, please, President Trump, don't hurt us anymore." That's not going to get us anywhere. And we do have this situation where they've got a massive trade surplus with us, and that seems to be of no interest to them. Well, I'm afraid we have to send a few signals of our own. So I'm agreeing with Bill.
Yeah, and I think Bill is probably right. I mean, look, it would seem that Trump doesn't want to take the phone calls of the Prime Minister or Kevin Rudd. There's probably obvious reasons for that. But why would you not play the same game? If they're going to do it to us, why would we not do it to them? I think it's almost sending a message of weakness to say, well, you can slap any tariff you want on us and we're not going to do the same to you. Why should they deserve any special treatment? Trump hasn't given any special treatment to anyone in this. He said that he put tariffs on everyone, and that's exactly what he's done.
Well, the trouble is, of course, though, that it's like that old nuclear war, Cold War thing about mutually assured destruction. I mean, slapping on tariffs on US imports into Australia will obviously increase our cost of living. And that's the last thing we want. But of course, that's exactly what he's doing to his own citizens. For example, on beef exports from Australia into the States, that is going to hurt everyday Americans, because make no mistake, and I was talking to my wife about it the other day. I mean, she's not an economist, but I tell you what, Lisa was onto it straight away. Any of these things, aluminium, steel, beef, the US producers will thank you very much, Mr. President. The price is going up to just below what the cost of the product from Australia is going to be. I mean, that's why tariffs fundamentally are a bad thing to have in place, and free trade has benefited us all. I'm a great fan of free trade, and I'm very dismayed to see where the world's going at the moment.
Yeah, and that'll be the big problem, the cost to the consumer, of course. Up in your neck of the woods, Campbell, there was this ridiculous story during the week that Queensland's disaster management boss, Alistair Dawson, went on leave and buggered off overseas on Sunday when, of course, southeast Queensland was dealing with flooding and, roofs were blowing away, etc. What on earth was he thinking? I mean, he's got one job. He was employed by the Palaszczuk government with one job, which is to manage natural disasters. There is a natural disaster and he takes off. I mean, why didn't the Emergency Services Minister say, excuse me, mate, you're not having your leave?
Minister Dan Purdy should not have allowed this to have occurred, shouldn't have approved it. I've been disappointed that the Christopher government have closed ranks this week to excuse the unexcusable. the inexcusable, I should say. Look, you know, that's what Mr. Dawson's paid to do. That's where his place is. No one in a leadership role directly in an emergency like that should be disappearing. We wouldn't have accepted it from the Prime Minister or a Premier or a Minister. Why should a senior public servant in that role be any different? It's just not on. And the words public servant have to mean something. Mr. Dawson should be serving the people of Queensland commensurate with his very generous remuneration.
Exactly, more than $300K a year. You'd think for that sort of money you could hang around and do your job when you're actually needed.